Karen Whitfield stood in her driveway at 6:47 a.m., measuring tape in one hand, clipboard in the other, her face twisted into the kind of scowl that could curdle milk. She'd been up since dawn, armed with her ruler and righteous indignation, documenting what she considered the most egregious violation of Willowbrook Estate's sacred HOA bylaws. 18 3/4 inches. She shrieked across the street, her voice carrying through the morning air like a foghorn. The regulation clearly states 18 inches maximum for lawn gnomes. Bob Martinez, barely awake and clutching his coffee mug, squinted at the tiny ceramic gnome by his mailbox. Karen, it's not even 7 in the morning. Can't this wait? The rules don't sleep, Robert. Karen's voice cracked with the fervor of someone who'd found her lice calling in other people's misery. She scribbled furiously on her clipboard, her pen leaving angry indentations on the paper. This is going straight to the board. 3/4 of an inch over regulation is 3/4 of an inch too much. What Bob didn't know was that Karen had spent the previous evening researching property values, convinced that his oversized gnome was personally responsible for the neighborhood's slight dip in market prices. She'd cross-referenced 17 different real estate websites, printed out 43 comparable sales, and highlighted every mention of curb appeal in fluorescent yellow. "You're insane," Bob muttered, but Karen had already moved on to her next victim. Mrs. Chen's rose bushes had grown exactly 2 inches beyond the invisible property line that existed only in Karen's mind. The elderly woman emerged from her house in her bathrobe, confused by the commotion. "These roses are clearly encroaching on common area," Karen announced, brandishing her measuring tape like a sword. "I'm recommending immediate removal and a $50 fine." But Karen, they're not even on. The HOA handbook is very clear about landscaping boundaries. Page 47, subsection C, paragraph 3. Karen's voice took on the tone of someone reciting scripture. She'd memorized the entire handbook, all 247 pages of mind-numbing regulations that most residents had never even opened. What started as a routine morning inspection had become Karen's personal crusade against what she saw as the slow decay of civilization itself. Every blade of grass over regulation height, every mailbox a shade off the approved color palette, every slightly faded house number, it all represented chaos, and Karen was the only thing standing between Willowbrook Estates and complete anarchy. By 8 a.m., she'd issued 14 violations, made 3 phone calls to the HOA board, and single-handedly turned a peaceful Tuesday morning into a neighborhood-wide crisis. The measuring tape incident, as it would come to be known, was just the beginning. Karen stood in the middle of the street, surveying her domain with the satisfaction of a general who'd just conquered enemy territory. She had no idea that her neighbors were already plotting their revenge, or that her obsession with control was about to spiral completely out of her grasp. The Willowbrook Estates Community Center hadn't seen this many angry residents since the great mailbox color controversy of 2019. Karen sat at the head of the conference table, her stack of violation notices organized by severity and cross-referenced with photographic evidence. She'd even created a PowerPoint presentation titled "Maintaining Property Values Through Vigilant Enforcement." "The deterioration of our community standards is happening at an alarming rate," Karen began, clicking to her first slide, a close-up photo of Bob's gnome next to a ruler. "If we allow these infractions to continue, we'll see property values plummet by an estimated 12 to 15%. Board member Janet Williams shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Karen, we appreciate your dedication, but issuing 14 violations in one morning seems excessive." "Excessive?" Karen's voice rose an octave. "What's excessive is allowing our neighborhood to turn into a slum. Yesterday I witnessed the Johnson family's sprinkler system watering their lawn for exactly 7 minutes and 32 seconds. The approved time is 7 minutes and 30 seconds. That's 2 seconds of waste." The room fell silent. Even Karen's usual allies on the board exchanged worried glances. Tom Peterson, the board treasurer, cleared his throat. "Karen, I think we need to discuss your approach to enforcement. We've received 47 complaints about your methods." 47? Karen's face flushed red. Those are 47 violations of the complaint procedure outlined in Section 12 of the bylaws. Each complaint should have been submitted in triplicate with supporting documentation. Karen, Janet interrupted, you followed Mrs. Chen around her yard with a measuring tape for 3 hours. Her grandson called it harassment. I call it thoroughness. Karen clicked to her next slide, a detailed diagram of property boundaries with violations marked in red. Mrs. Chen's garden hose was coiled counterclockwise. The regulations clearly state clockwise coiling for aesthetic uniformity. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Karen noticed the board members weren't taking notes anymore. They were staring at her with expressions ranging from concern to outright fear. There's more, Karen continued, oblivious to the shift in atmosphere. She'd spent weeks preparing this presentation, and nothing would stop her from delivering it. The Peterson family's dog barked for exactly 4 minutes and 17 seconds yesterday at 2:43 p.m. Continuous barking is defined as 5 minutes or more, but accumulated barking throughout the day clearly exceeds acceptable limits. Tom's face turned pale. You've been timing my dog's barking. I've been documenting noise violations, as is my duty as HOA president. Karen's voice carried the weight of someone who believed she was saving civilization itself. I've also noticed that your garbage bins are positioned 3 inches too far from the curb. That's a recurring violation. The room erupted in angry voices. Residents who'd been quietly enduring Karen's reign of terror suddenly found their voices. Accusations flew like arrows. Midnight inspections, harassment, threats of legal action over minor infractions. Karen stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. Order, order. This is a formal board meeting, and proper procedure must be followed. But the dam had burst. Janet Williams stood up, her hands shaking. Karen, I'm calling for an emergency vote. I motion to remove you as HOA president, effective immediately. You can't do that. Karen's voice cracked. I've done nothing but enforce the rules that keep this community prestigious. All in favor. Janet's voice was steady now, backed by the anger of 47 families who'd had enough. Every hand in the room shot up except Karen's. The vote was unanimous. Karen gathered her papers with trembling hands, her carefully organized violation notices scattered across the table. As she walked toward the door, she turned back to face the room. You'll regret this, she said quietly. When property values crash and this place turns into chaos, you'll come crawling back. But Karen had no intention of giving up. As she drove home, her mind was already racing with plans. If they wouldn't let her enforce the rules from the inside, she'd find another way. Karen's living room looked like a surveillance command center. She'd installed 6 high-definition security cameras around her property, each one strategically positioned to monitor her neighbors' activities. Multiple computer screens displayed live feeds, and she'd invested in a high-powered telephoto lens that could capture license plates from 3 blocks away. If they think removing me from the board will stop me, they're gravely mistaken, Karen muttered, adjusting the angle on camera 3 to get a better view of the Martinez driveway. She'd been documenting violations for 3 weeks now, building what she called her evidence portfolio. The doorbell rang, interrupting her surveillance activities. Karen peered through the peephole to see 2 police officers standing on her porch. Ma'am, we've received complaints about harassment, Officer Rodriguez said when Karen reluctantly opened the door. Multiple neighbors have reported that you've been following them with cameras and taking pictures of their children. I'm documenting HOA violations. Karen replied, her voice tight with indignation. It's perfectly legal to photograph from my own property. Ma'am, you were reported taking pictures of the Johnson family's 10-year-old daughter while she was playing in their backyard. Officer Martinez stepped forward, his expression serious. That's not about HOA violations. Karen's face went white. I was photographing their fence. It's 6 inches too tall according to the original community guidelines. We need you to stop, Officer Rodriguez said firmly. No more cameras pointed at your neighbors' homes. No more following people around. If we get another complaint, we'll have to consider stalking charges. After the officers left, Karen stood in her living room, staring at her surveillance setup. The cameras that had made her feel powerful now seemed to mock her. She'd crossed a line. she didn't even realize existed, and the weight of it was crushing. Her phone buzzed with a text from her daughter in California. "Mom, I saw the neighborhood Facebook posts. Please call me. We need to talk." Karen's hands shook as she scrolled through the Willowbrook Estates Facebook group. There were dozens of posts about her, complete with photos of her lurking in bushes with her camera and following the mail carrier to document delivery times. Someone had even started a petition to have her banned from common areas. The comments were brutal. "She's lost her mind. I'm scared to let my kids play outside. She needs professional help." Karen sank into her chair, the weight of her actions finally hitting her. She'd alienated every neighbor, lost her position of power, and turned herself into a community pariah. The rules she tried so desperately to enforce had become her prison. But as she sat there, something shifted in her mind. A new plan began to form, one that would make her previous efforts look like child's play. If Willowbrook Estates wouldn't appreciate her dedication to maintaining standards, perhaps another community would. Karen opened her laptop and began researching neighboring HOAs. Pinehurst Gardens was only 15 minutes away, and according to their website, they were looking for dedicated community volunteers. She smiled for the first time in weeks. The measuring tape incident had been just the beginning. Karen Whitfield was about to take her talents to a whole new battlefield. As she drafted her volunteer application, Karen caught her reflection in the computer screen. The woman staring back looked tired, desperate, and completely unaware that her reign of terror was about to begin all over again. The question wasn't whether Karen had learned her lesson. It was whether Pinehurst Gardens was ready for what was coming.